Hi, my name is Stacy and I'm making a video about how to get a great scant 1/4 inch seam for piecing a quilt top on the Janome Skyline S7. I've been working on this machine for about 5 years now. I really love it. It took me a while to find the method and the combination of sort of feet and stitch selection in order to get that very consistent, very nice seam that I was looking for. So I wanted to share what I tried and sort of where I ended up in order to get that consistent seam. So let's get started. Thank you for joining me.
Okay, so these are the feet that we're going to look at today. This is the standard presser foot with the A foot. We're not actually going to use the A foot. We'll pop that off to the side. What we're going to use on our standard holder is what's called the O foot, and this is made for 1/4 inch piecing. You can see that here there is a metal guide that comes down to line your fabric on. This is the accufeed flex holder. This is the standard foot. We're not going to use the standard foot on here. The way that we pop it off, there's little like plastic tabs inside the holder, and so I'm a little careful about this, and so I just like to take it into my hand and I kind of stabilize everything, and I take my thumb here to the back of the foot and just give it a little pressure and it'll pop forward. And instead we're going to put on the foot that is made for piecing. And so again, I don't know if you can see in here, we'll zoom it in. There's these two little metal tabs. Do you see these little slots here? Yeah, so they get lined up into those slots. So what we need to do, and I find it's easiest to do this if I've got it stable on the tabletop, and then with these fingers I'm just kind of pinching and I'll just push forward and it clicks into place. We're also going to look at the narrow accufeed flex holder, which is called the single. And then the last foot we're going to look at is the HP foot. Okay, so the first foot that we're going to look at is this O foot with this metal guide. And what we want to do on our stitch setup is we're going to go ahead and click this little icon, choose quilt, and then we're going to use 1/4 inch piecing. Now you can notice down here, these two little boxes are highlighted yellow, and that's because I have changed and saved my stitch settings over the default settings. So if you hit default, this is how your machine would be set up if you haven't made any changes. This is kind of the factory settings for using this feet. And what I find is this 8.3, it's really just too wide. It gives me a wide 1/4 inch seam, and I like a scant 1/4 inch. And then also the factory settings set at 1.8 millimeters for my stitch length, and I like a 2.0. All right, so because here, if I select these, because I have this saved in my memory, right? Every time I sit down and I press this stitch selection, these settings automatically come up for me, which is great because I don't have to remember to make the changes. All right, so now let's go ahead and see how that looks. I'm gonna go. So I like to use a leader when I piece. All right, so now let's just run this up, and you can see what I'm doing here is lining my fabric up with this black little metal guard. That's what I'm looking at. And the other thing that's nice is on the machine, the way that it happens to work out really well is that this 3/8 inch mark happens to be in line with this black guard. So if you want to look down here at this little marking, if you're just covering that marking, you're going to be nice and straight. All right, and you can see there we have it, a nice 1/4 inch seam, and this was done with that O foot. Okay, so now we have the accufeed flex holder with the 1/4 inch guide installed, and for this foot we're going to use the same thing that we did before, the same stitch selection. So let's go ahead and click that little icon. We'll go to quilt and 1/4 inch piecing, and again brings up the same settings that I had saved before. The needle is positioned over to the right. We've got this metal guide right here. So after my leader gets to the end, I'm going to go ahead ahead and line right up with that metal guide and the 3/8 inch mark here. This is the foot that I use when I'm attaching a binding to the quilt. I like having the accufeed flex on because those feed dogs on the top help to move that thicker quilt sandwich through the machine. I think it's pretty wide and I feel like I can't see things quite as well when I'm doing my piecing, and so it's not what I choose when I'm piecing, but I definitely do like this for attaching the binding. All right, so there we go. Okay, so this is the narrow or single accufeed flex holder. This is just a standard foot. There are no guides. It's just nice and narrow. So if you look, let's lift it up, and I'm going to put my fabric, and I'm going to get my fabric aligned right with the edge of this foot. That also lines up very well with this 1/4 inch mark here and the 1/4 inch mark here. So if you don't like using a guide and you want to just have a standard foot that you're using and you want to be able to line up on those, you can see those 1/4 inch marks, this is a great foot to do that with. Okay, we're going to go press our little stitch selection icon. We'll go to quilting. I'm going to leave it here. Now, I like a scant 1/4 inch, so I'm going to move my needle over by 2 little clicks here to 4.7. And again, I keep my stitch length at 2. Now, I want to save these settings forever so that I don't have to remember to keep making those changes. So I'm just going to hit FS for favorite stitch, click that folder, and now every time I choose that stitch, these settings will come up. What I'm looking at as I'm feeding it through is I'm looking at these 2 lines here, and I'm making sure that my piece is lined up with those lines. But it also lines up with the edge of the foot here. This is a 1/4 inch seam using the narrow accufeed flex. Okay, so the last foot that we're going to look at, and my personal favorite for piecing, is the HB foot. It has a shank that pushes over. It's got this little bend here that pushes it over to the left, and the foot itself is pretty small, and you can see these 2 legs. I'm not sure if that's what they're called, but we're going to go with that. On the right-hand side is much shorter. The other thing that is different about this foot from the other feet is that when we install it on the machine, these feed dogs are going to be left open and we're not actually going to use them. So we're only going to be using the feed dogs that are on this side of the machine, only the left feed dogs, and I feel like that helps in accuracy as well. When we use the HP foot, we're going to use stitch selection 4 under our utility stitches. The needle position is at 0.5, so off to the left. And I like to use this 2.0 for my stitch length, so you can see I have that saved in my settings. The edge of my fabric with the right edge of the foot. Now this doesn't really correlate with any of the markings that are on the machine, so I'm only looking at this edge. You can see that, I think you can see how we're not using these feed dogs. I feel like this just goes through so smoothly and easily, and I can really see what I need to see, and this is how I get the nicest scant 1/4 inch seam. I'm also able to be the most consistent with this particular foot. And that might be the case for you, or maybe not. Maybe one of these other options work better for you. So there we go.
Thanks so much for joining me today, taking a look at the different options for feet and stitch combinations to get that great scant 1/4 inch seam. This is the little project I'm working on, sewing these cute tumbler blocks to make some mug rugs. Anyway, I just wanted to say hit subscribe down below if you want to see some more tips for working with your Janome Skyline S7. I do not work for Janome, and this is not a sponsored ad. I just want you to love your machine as much as I love mine. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And again, let me know if you try any of these and you find that something is really helpful. I'd love to hear that you found a combination that works for you.